So here's the kicker. Last month, a seemingly run-of-the-mill 1974 Lincoln Cent in certified MS65 rolled across the auction block and hammered for a staggering $1,250 on June 8th, 2025. Even though most folks think of 1974 pennies as pocket change, and I'm telling you, nobody saw that coming. You might be scratching your head. How does a coin minted by the billions suddenly turn into a $1,000 piece? Well, that's exactly where the story gets interesting. This coin, well, it surprised everyone. At first glance, nothing jumps out. But look again, an early dye polish on the obverse that almost erased the tiniest hairlines, leaving a ghostly shimmer in Lincoln's cheek. Here's exactly what to look for. Tilt the coin under bright light and hunt for those faint parallel lines across the bust that shouldn't be there. That's your invitation to dig deeper. And here's exactly what to look for. Flip it over to the reverse and search just above the wheat stalk. A faint doubling on the one that hints at a subtle die rotation before striking. You wouldn't expect that, would you? Most folks miss this detail, but it makes all the difference between a face value cent and a collector's must-have. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a wheat penny from 74, one of the most common dates ever struck, hold any surprises? But here's the thing. From the mint's frenzy to keep up with copper demand to a last-minute hub change, a handful of planchets got mismatched and overpolished. See the problem here? That mismatch in production created an accidental variety that only shows up in high grades, and only if you know exactly where to peek. Collector Maria from Ohio actually stumbled on her example while leafing through Dad's old Whitman folder. She barely paid it any mind until she noticed a ghost line on Lincoln's jaw. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, she told me. But as soon as she Googled the price guide and found that $1,250 sale, well, her jaw dropped. Suddenly, that dusty folder went from Grandma's keepsakes to a treasure trove. And then collectors noticed something odd. A second Maria in Texas posted an identical piece on a forum, and soon 3 more surfaced across the country. What's wild is that they all came from circulated rolls, untouched since the 70s. Naturally, you'll want to check your collection for this rolling error, especially if you picked up quarter boxes back in the day. There's a red flag, though. Some shady sellers have started applying a chemical wash to simulate that soft, matte dye-polished look. One authentication warning. If you see too much luster concentrated just around Lincoln's eye rim, paired with an unnaturally sharp rim edge, that chemical whisper might be hiding a harsh buff. Trust me, don't let that polishing compound fool you into paying top dollar for a clean common date. Talk trends for a second. Circulated 1974 cents. The everyday VG to F grade you might fish out of your change have held steady around 8 to 12 cents in the past year. About as exciting as your morning coffee, right? But as you move up, AU55 coins are trading in the $40 to $60 range, thanks to that dye-polished variety fetching premium interest. And uncirculated MS63 pieces will land around $150 on a steady market, with MS65 examples commanding the real attention. Last sale at $1,250 being the poster child for rarity. Overall, prices here are rising modestly, a slow burn as more collectors hunt the elusive error in high grade. Here's what you never hear about most wheat pennies. They're not all destined for the junk pile. In fact, the mintage of 1.8 billion in 1974 hides a tiny subpopulation of experimental strips where planchet thickness dipped just under spec. One little-known fact, those underweight planchets sometimes strike with a slightly disinterred die, yielding coins with a marginally off-center appearance but razor-sharp detail. You'd swear they were proof-like, yet they came from circulation-quality dies. Talk about a double whammy for speculators and die variety hunters alike. I've seen plenty of these, but only a handful pass 5th grade fingerprint tests where residual mint grease clings in those dye polish lines. It's a wild hunt, and every coin you pick up could be the next big story. Think about that the next time you tip a parking meter or pull bills from your wallet. Suddenly, that handful of pennies in your pocket feels like a mini lottery ticket. So hold on to that penny strip, let it catch dust for a minute, then come back with fresh eyes. Most seasoned collectors will tell you one secret. Patience pays off more than any price guide. And while everybody's chasing the next big jailbreak error coin, you might already have treasure in your change jar, just waiting for that shine to catch your eye. And here's the next twist. As you tuck away that 1974 piece, imagine pulling out a 1988 penny that suddenly becomes the star of the show. Just last month, on May 22nd, 2025, a PCGS-graded MS66RD 1988 Lincoln Cent double-die obverse sold for $920, catching everyone off guard. You wouldn't expect a late 80s zinc penny to spark that kind of frenzy, would you? But that's exactly the shocker that set collectors talking. This coin, well, it sneaks up on you. At first glance, it's the same copper-plated zinc you've handled a million times. But look closer at Lincoln's ear and the word Liberty. Here's exactly what to look for. Under magnification, you'll see a ghost image doubling the letters, as though two impressions overlapped ever so slightly. That's the hallmark of the famed 1988 double-die obverse, a subtle error that only shows up on a fraction of 1% of that year's mintage. And here's exactly what to look for. Flip it and check the date. The numeral 8 should have an unusually thick upper loop compared to the lower, another tip-off no one expects. And then collectors notice something odd. A handful of these DDR pieces showed up in casual circulation back in the 90s, tucked away in pocket change and forgotten for decades. Collector Dave from Michigan found his in a till at a diner, just one lonely 1988 cent among thousands of common dates. "It was our family's Sunday brunch," he laughed, "and I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw the letters jump." What's wild is that his example, graded MS65RD, hammered for $600 at auction just last year. Proof that sometimes the biggest finds happen in the most ordinary spots. You'll want to check your change for this variety, particularly if you snagged rolls in the late 80s or early 90s. But here's the thing. Some sellers have started using low-grade copper plating to mimic that warm red-brown hue, hoping to pass off clean pieces as mint originals. One authentication warning. If the coin's edges look too bright or the fields show tiny pockmarks under 4 times magnification, it's probably a replated regular strike. Trust your loop, not the shine. In terms of market values, common circulated 1988 cents still trade at face value. Yes, literally 1 cent, since billions rolled off the presses. But if you spot that doubling, the game changes. An AU55 DDR example will fetch around $75 on a steady market, while MS63RD DDR coins hover near $200. And jump up to MS65RD DDR, and you're looking at $600 to $800, depending on eye appeal. As for standard unvariety coins, MS63RD pieces generally check in under $2, with MS65 pushing $5 or $6. Nothing compared to the DDR premiums, but a reminder that condition always counts. Here's what you never hear about 1988 pennies. The mint experimented mid-year with a slightly different zinc alloy, hoping to improve strike detail. That small tweak caused a handful of planchets to crack on the rim during striking, yielding coins with a delicate raised lip, almost like a cameo-proof effect. One little-known fact, those rim crack examples can sometimes command $100 or more in higher grades because they're a mint error collector's dream. And then there's the red flag you'll want to avoid. If you spot surface dots that resemble pitting but feel raised to the touch, you might be looking at lamination issues from spotty plating, not intentional errors. Those flaws send value tumbling. So know the difference between a genuine mint mishap and post-mint corrosion. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a modern penny hold that much excitement? But it boils down to rarity. Just a handful of those DDR coins slipped past quality control before collectors caught on. And remember Dave's story? It proves you don't need a fancy collection or a high-end dealer. Sometimes all it takes is a casual glance when you're paying for a burger. Ready for the final chapter? Let's dive into the last piece and wrap this all up with the closing insights you need. And now, when you reach into your pocket for one of those ubiquitous 1982 zinc cents, you might just be holding your next jaw-dropper. Believe it or not, on June 2nd, 2025, an NGC-graded MS67RD 1982 no mint mark Lincoln Cent. The variety struck on thin bronze planchets before mid-year, sold for a stunning $1,450. That's right. What most of us tossed in tip jars has quietly become a collector's lightning bolt. This coin, well, it creeps up on you. At first, it feels as light as air because, well, that's exactly what it is. But look again. Those early 1982 cents were still struck in the original copper-zinc alloy, thicker and heavier than the later pure zinc issues. Here's exactly what to look for. Place the coin on a precision scale. Any cent registering above 3.1 grams is likely a bronze strike, a game-changer for collectors. And here's exactly what to look for. Under bright light, inspect the exarch. That area below the date genuine bronze planchets show a warm, golden-orange hue, not the pale silver of zinc. I've seen plenty of 1982s, but only a slice yield that unmistakable bronze gleam that sends values soaring. And then collectors notice something odd. A small subset of those bronze pieces showed a faint die crack running through Lincoln's jawline, something that only popped up on the earliest strikes before the mint switched to lighter planchets. Collector Jenna from Oregon discovered hers at a coin show, tucked inside a Whitman folder labeled 1982W. She thought W stood for proof, until she weighed it and noticed the reddish glow. "I almost fainted when they told me what it was worth," she said. And her MS65RD example, cracked die and all, went for $1,050 in April, proof that variety hunters prize these early survivors. You'll want to check your collection for this before you roll out for dinner, especially if you bought 1982 copper zinc rolls back in college. One authentication warning. If you see surface scratches concentrated around Lincoln's shoulder, paired with uniform coloration, that's a post-mint plating attempt to mimic bronze sheen. Don't fall for it. Real planchets have a subtle mottled texture, tiny speckles where the alloy settled at striking. Market trends here are even more dramatic. Ordinary circulated 1982 cents. The mixed bags with both bronze and zinc examples are still worth face value, believe it or not. But those rare bronze strikes in AU50 go for around $150, and AU58 examples, with decent color, trade near $400. Uncirculated MS63RD bronze coins push $800, with MS65 and above carving out the top tier, $1, $200 to $1,500 territory, depending on eye appeal. Meanwhile, standard zinc pennies in MS65 might fetch $3 to $5. Hardly headline news, but a solid reminder that the alloy switch changed everything. What's wild is that 1982 marks the single largest mintage transition in U.S. history. Over 6 billion cents that year, yet fewer than 20,000 bronze planchets slipped through. One little-known fact: early test strikes on bronze planchets sometimes retained slight verdigris flecks, tiny green specks from storage, that, if left uncleaned, can actually raise value for purists looking for untouched survivors. And then there's the red flag you need to avoid. If you spot flaking copper around the rim, it's likely a zinc core showing through, not a mint error. Those spots aren't collector gold. They're just corrosion, and they'll tank any supposed rarity back to face value. Now, I know what you're thinking. Can a coin that swapped metals mid-year really be that elusive? But remember Jenna's story. One casual glance at a folder labeled W turned into a four-figure payday. And that die crack through Lincoln's jaw? That's the kind of tiny signature that turns just another penny into a must-have for specialist collections. See the pattern here? Real value waits behind the mundane. You don't need a high-powered dealer or a crystal-clear proof cabinet. Sometimes, the next big find is jingling in your pocket right now. So take a closer look, let your curiosity drive the hunt. And remember, every coin has a story, and every story has its value, if you know where to look.